Nikki Haley's in a little bit of trouble after she was at a campaign stop and she got a question about the Civil War. You see, this is being retweeted, reposted by Biden-Harris HQ. A lot of people taking this one and running with it, including the Democrats. DeSantis is doing the same thing, as are others. But here is what happened at the town hall. Nikki Haley's up on the stage. Someone asks her a question about the Civil War, and she kind of glosses over the whole thing, doesn't mention that, S word, the slavery word, that obviously is in American civics textbooks, right? All kids. What was the Civil War about? Slavery, kind of one of those automatic things, even though, of course, it was a very complicated thing. It's not always about one particular issue. There's multiple issues that lead to a country fracturing. But of course, slavery was the topic du jour of the day. It was a big topic. It was a huge issue, obviously, in this country. We went to war over it. But here's how Nikki Haley answered the question, and this is how it went down.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Kind of an interesting, gotcha question.
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry?
I'm not running for president. I want to see your view.
I'm not running for president. You are.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
Thank you. And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery? Next question.
Okay, next question. So she's kind of, well, what do you want me to say about slavery? Doesn't want to talk about that word, doesn't even mention it in the whole context of things. I mean, she could have easily said, yeah, slavery is obviously a major component to the fracturing of the country. It had to involve states' rights, obviously. Some states, as a union was expanding, they wanted to bring in the practice of slavery. Other states did not. In fact, the Republican Party under Abraham Lincoln was the party that stopped that. Okay, the Democrats were the people in the South who were endeavoring to continue the practice of slavery, and the Republican Party said no. And so we went to war over that. Slavery was a big problem in this country. We're grateful that it's gone. It's a scourge and it should never have happened. But this is something the country went to war for, and we fought and died, hundreds of thousands of Americans to preserve this union and to improve this nation as we evolve as a society. And so it was a very complicated issue. Thank you for your question. Next question, something like that. And instead, she kind of didn't even say that S word, which was an interesting thing to leave out. Now she comes back and she's going to be explaining this. She did respond to this. She said, of course the Civil War was about slavery. So I was like, oh, okay, she got it now. We know that. That's the easy part of it. What I was saying was, what does it mean to us today? What it means to us today, it's about freedom. That's what it was all about, right? So a nice little backtrack, nice way to save it. But she could have just said that S word. It's the buzzword that guy was looking for and that everybody was going to capitalize upon. So here's how she is explaining it in the aftermath.
The war was about slavery. We know that. That's the easy part of it. What I was saying was, what does it mean to us today? What it means to us today is about freedom. That's what that was all about. It was about individual freedom. It was about economic freedom. It was about individual rights. Our goal is to make sure, no, we never go back to the stain of slavery, but what's the lesson in all of that?
So, trying to explain it away, maybe just a brain flub, maybe just a brain, mistake, whatever was going on there. But what's been interesting is the reaction to a lot of this. So DeSantis is highlighting this, saying, this is pretty brutal, and others are trying to cover up for it. So Caitlin Collins says, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run. That's what Haley answered. Now, this is how CNN responded to it. And my point on this is I think that it would be very different if Trump, if this was Trump or something, if this was Vivek or something. They'd say, wow, what a racist. He can't even mention slavery because he's such a bigot, right? If this was Trump. But it's not. It's Nikki Haley. Okay, so she's a deep state apparatchik. She's somebody who wants, the same thing that CNN wants, which is basically endless war and endless coverage of that war. And so this is how they're reacting to that statement from Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley is in New Hampshire tonight making her case to voters. She's been doing this repeatedly. She was asked tonight, just a few moments ago, by a voter about what was the cause of the Civil War. This is how she responded.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry?
I'm not being president. I wanted to see your view on the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government. What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
Now, it's not your average town hall question, but she did seem surprised by it. And the voter, as you could hear there, called her out for not mentioning slavery. What do you make of that answer?
It's been pretty easy to just say that and move on. But it's also, I think, pretty clear that that voter was kind of trying to catch her and saying something that would potentially make her less appealing to those independent voters in New Hampshire that she's going to rely on so heavily. So this was an easy question to answer. I wish she had answered it using easy words, say slavery. There's a disagreement in our country about it. But ultimately, I don't think it's actually going to hurt her standing one way or another with Republican primary voters.
There's a disagreement about slavery. Is anybody for slavery in this country? I'm not. And I don't think anyone is. So and it's a strange thing. It feels like it's a little bit like they're papering over it. Well, kind of an unfair question. What is easy? Not that big of a deal. And so it's interesting to watch the reaction to it. I mean, again, if that were Donald Trump who didn't say slavery, if that was his question, I think they'd have a meltdown. How dare, like Adolf or something, right? They're already calling him Mussolini, for crying out loud. So, all right, that's Nikki Haley, and she is, as I said, backtracking on this a little bit. Now, there's some other reaction to this. For example, we've got questions about whether Donald Trump is going to be nominating her as the vice presidency, in the vice presidency role. There were a couple things that popped up on this. Donald Trump got asked about this over on the Real America's Voice network with Just the News and John Solomon. And here is what that exchange sounded like when Donald Trump called in to talk about Nikki Haley as a potential number 2 on the ticket.
Suggesting you might be considering Nikki Haley as a vice president. I want you to answer that. Are you considering her? And second of all, what do you want the American people to know about her record on the border, on taxes, on spending, and on entitlements?
Well, Nikki, I know very well. And I actually got along with her very well, and she wasn't going to run. She said I was a great president, and she would not run as long as I ran. And, that's famous. That's documented with her statements. It's on about 15 tapes and, broadcast all over the place. And then one day she decided to run. So, I thought that was somewhat disloyal. Not nearly as disloyal as Ron DeSanctimonious, who I got elected. And then he, ran. So that was, and he's crashed and burned. And, she's way behind. She's like 50, 60 points behind me. But if she goes up 1 point, they say she surges. In the last poll, I went up 7 points to almost 70, which is hard because I have very little points to go up. They've been used, right? They've been taken already. But I went up 7 points. She went up 3 points, and he went down a couple of points. But because she went up 3 points and he went down, they said she surged, that Nikki Haley surged. But she didn't surge against me. She surged against Ron. But the point is that, look, I know her very well. I actually got along with her very well. As you know, she left at a nice ceremony at the White House, the Oval Office. It was very nice. She said terrific things about me. She said he's a great president. And then she decided out of nowhere to run. So I was a little bit surprised at that, but that's a politician. No, I'm not considering anybody at this time, Jen. Look, I want to win. And one thing I will say, and I've watched this for a long time, the vice president has virtually no impact. You could go back all throughout history. Whoever the choice of vice president is has virtually no impact as to who is going to get a nomination to get elected. It's an amazing thing, actually.
As a nomination to get elected, I was going to say Mike Pence was pretty instrumental in a whole sequence of events that we have covered a lot here. So the vice presidency is an important role, but is it going to impact how Trump wins in 2024? I also think that it will. Now, I think what he's saying is it's not going to impact the nomination process, which might be true. So that Trump is not, beholden to having a VP in order to secure the nomination. I think he is going to secure it anyways, and then he can pick his VP, so it's not consequential to that. But I do think that the vice presidential role is important, which is why I do not want it to be Nikki Haley. But I can understand, right, the political pull here, the siren song of Nikki Haley appeasing female voters that don't like Trump is going to be a strong magnet for his campaign to really encourage him to pick her. And he's already picked her to be the ambassador over there at the UN. But when she was over there at the UN, we had some questions about her position on China. And so Nikki Haley got asked about some of this, about why she had backtracked on China, where she was the #1 governor when she was in South Carolina, recruiting CCP businesses. But then she kind of flipped it now that she's running for office on a national campaign.
A lot of Republicans are talking tough on China. You're among them for sure. One of the policies you said you would pursue would be to ban China from buying land in the United States and force it to sell any land it already owns. However, during your days as governor, your state had more Chinese investment really than any other Republican governor, almost $600 billion. What do you say to people who calls it kind of a hypocritical stance?
I think every governor in the country has tried to recruit Chinese companies.
Sure.
Just like every...
But this is an about face.
Every governor in the country tried to recruit Chinese companies, just like every American household has Chinese products. Me recruiting a fiberglass company 10 years ago is very different than what we know about China today. That was 1%.
Do you regret that stance, though?
At the time, a fiberglass company coming to South Carolina didn't mean anything.
But in hindsight,
that was 1% of the companies we brought. We built planes with Boeing. We built more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought a Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, 5 international tire companies. They referred to us as the beast of the Southeast. So one Chinese fiberglass company 10 years ago is not going to deal with the fact that I have fought China every day that I was at the United Nations and every day since.
All right, tough on China, Nikki. We'll see if that is something that holds. Here was Trump about 10 days ago, a little bit longer than that, who was also asked about Nikki Haley, saying that Haley and Trump have both gone after Ron DeSantis, but Trump is not spending against Haley, which is interesting. So this is an exchange from this show. Trump called in here.
Your daughter-in-law, Lara, said this week on Newsmax that she was asked, would you consider Nikki Haley as your running mate in 2024? And she said, never say never. Would you really consider Nikki Haley?
That's an interesting, I wouldn't, right now, I'm not even thinking about that. I've always gotten along with Nikki, but I think, what she did was, I would never run against the president. He was a great president and all of that. And then, a year, 2 years later, she says, I guess I'll run. And hasn't picked up much steam. They say surge, but the one that's surging is us, because I went up 10 points and she went up 3 and DeSantis went down. So that's not much of a surge, although it is a surge against him. He's doing very poorly, actually.
So never say never to picking Nikki as your running mate, or would you say never?
Well, look, I think it's unlikely because, it's one of those things. I think it's unlikely. We have some things in common and some things we don't have in common, and some of those things are pretty important. We have, obviously, mine is a campaign of common sense. We want strong borders. We got to have our borders back. We have to have elections. We have to have a strong and powerful elections that are honest, as opposed to what we've had. We're like a third world country. We have things in common. We have things that probably wouldn't agree with her very much on, but we have a lot of great candidates. That's one thing. I don't think about it too much, I have to tell you, but we have a lot of great candidates.
All right, so not a hard no. Says we've said nice things about each other and so on. So $0 being spent against her. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it is interesting to see how this is developing. And I certainly hope that Trump is not going to pick her, but I can understand the strong magnetic pull to do so. And this is something that I think Vivek has hit exactly right. People who are supporting Nikki Haley are people we've talked about here. People like Reid Hoffman, okay? The same Reid Hoffman who funded E. Jean Carroll, Ms. Bergdorf's entire litigation against Donald Trump and was successful in that. The same guy who flew to Epstein's Island several times, Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, drops millions of dollars into these campaigns. And so this guy was asking Vivek, he said, hey, Vivek, you posted on social media that it's not going to be Trump, it's not going to be Joe Biden, that the entities in this country are already gearing up for someone else that they're going to just shove into our faces. And this was an interesting exchange. This is what this guy was asking in response to this question. Vivek posted this. He said, it's clear the puppet masters have lost their use for Biden and they're slowly sidelining him. But the real trick is who they're propping up instead. It's not Gavin. It's not Michelle, as I'd assumed before. Many of us have. It's far more insidious. Open your eyes, folks. It's staring us right in the face. This gentleman asked Vivek about that.
It's good to see you guys.
What did you mean on social media when you said that they're not going to, they're going to take Biden out? It's not going to be Newsom.
Oh, this is a longer story. It takes a dark turn, but I think it's. I have a good sense of what's going to happen here.
Okay.
They're leading into a trap. They're not going to let Trump get anywhere near the White House. They're not going to let him. So the goal is, have him be the nominee, and by hell or high water, one way or other, they're not going to have him. They're not going to let him.
What about the other two, though?
It's not them.
Who is it?
It's within our own party.
Okay. It's within our own party?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Hey, look at the people who voted to keep Trump off the ballot. Who are they putting up? Who are lawsuits to keep him off the ballot? Larry Fink to Reid Hoffman. Who are they propping up? So it's a game. I'm in this to make sure that doesn't happen. They want it to be a two-horse race, eliminate him, put up actually the Trojan horse within the Republican Party that keeps the war machine humming and keeps the restrictions on speech and the censorship agenda. Get it done. Who needs Democrats when you can get it done through the Republican Party?
Yep.
So you do the math. Okay. You do the math on that. That's what's coming.
Hey, thanks again for taking my question.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
And I
Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And we've had some very serious concerns about that. And the idea is you convict Trump, okay? You convict him in some way, shape, or form, which I still have concerns about. And then the Republicans use that to stab him in the back and swap him off the top of the ticket, right? Not the Democrats, the Republicans. And they just swap in Nikki Haley right in there as number 2. They say Trump's a convicted felon. Oh no, he can't even vote for himself. And so our party rules say that we can't do this or whatever, right? And there's some sort of shenanigans there. And they just do the old switcheroo. That's my concern. Now, I'm very hopeful that doesn't happen. It would be the death of the party. I mean, Republicans would lose the election automatically. I don't know that they care. And I've made this point many times too here, like a broken record. They would rather see their team lose and be on the losing team than rather have Trump win. Like, they hate that. It's like somebody on a football team who hates the star quarterback. And so they just, botch the whole game because they don't want that guy to get, the accolades or something like that, right? It's sour grapes. It's bitter. If Trump's going to be in charge, well, there may not be endless war, and the Republicans want endless war, just like the Democrats do. If Trump's in office, maybe the border gets solved. Well, they don't want that. Neither party does. And so, they just keep propping up Nikki Haley, Reid Hoffman, and these other guys, Larry Fink, donating tons of money to her, the same people that were doing everything in their human power to stop Trump. So I think Vivek is right about that. It is a very serious concern. I think it would basically be the death of the Republican Party if they tried some shenanigans like that. But they're the Republicans, so I wouldn't put it past them. So that's Nikki Haley, who is trying to figure out what happened in the Civil War. And we got Trump, who's not throwing her to the wind, saying that no, absolutely not. And we know that there's a conspiracy afoot to stop Trump. And so we'll be here continuing to cover this, my friends. Thank you for subscribing wherever it is you're watching this. Thanks for checking out robertgovea.com to sign up for our daily newsletter and grab some gear at the shop. And we'll see you here on the next one.